Hello, everyone. Let's talk about the Fomorians. Dark, bestial, controversial spirits of Celtic mythology, specifically remote to Ireland. So, I like to akin the Fomorians to the Titans of Greco-Roman mythology because, as you'll see, they're very similar in the sense that they gave birth to some new gods that are now like the gods, of Ireland or of Celtic mythology at large. And these children gods, the Tethra Demeanor, turned against their parents and exiled or killed them, much like Zeus and the other Olympians did to the Titans, their parents. So, with that similar story out of the way, let's talk about some specifics and such. So, some people say that there were 4 races of people that settled Ireland at some point, ultimately leading up to the Tethra, which are going to be like the Dagda, the Morgan, and all of them, okay? So that's where we're ending, was like with the Morgan and her folks. So, some say there were 4, including them. Some say there were 6. Some say that these were all gods, different types of gods that came and left the island of Ireland. Some say that these were real, actual people historically, and try to work them in the timeline of our actual world, along with working in, like, the timeline of Jesus and Christianity. It's very fascinating. That is a deep rabbit hole for you to go down. A deep hole for you to go down, where people try to reconcile where these people may have come from, if they were Greeks that came to settle, if they were Israelites. It's fascinating. But anywho, lest we spiral out of control there. So there were the Fomorians. Some say that they were the second people who came. Some say that they were the first. It does not really matter. Okay. Because they were probably the most infamous. So essentially the Fomorians came. They were definitely godlike. But in keeping with world mythology, whenever we're trying to discredit generations from before us, we demonize them, right? So a lot of the times when you look up the Fomorians, they're going to be described as malevolent, monstrous. Sometimes they're portrayed as giants. Sometimes they're portrayed as half human, half animal creatures. Regardless, they're always grotesque usually and disturbing in appearance and in personality. However, as is with pretty much all things, if you dig deeper, you find contradictory information. So, there are some stories where they're just people. Gods are not. They're just coming to live here. And they get swallowed by the sea. And in those stories, they're described as darkly beautiful people who are alluring, but possibly untrustworthy. So I like that much better. I mean, who doesn't love a monster and a giant? That's awesome. However, for them to be more like maybe Morrigan territory, right? Where they're dark and alluring, but maybe preside over dark things. That's fascinating and a little bit more palatable for me. But to each their own. Regardless, they were swallowed by the sea. Different reasons why they were swallowed by the sea. Was it accident? Was it not? Was it from war with another tribe of people? Blah, blah, blah. All you need to know is that they were swallowed by the ocean. But they did not die. They now live under the ocean, off the coast of Ireland, right? And this is where their name comes from. So who knows what their name was before being called the Fomorians? We don't know. So, because Fomorian, the etymology is highly debated. However, the most accepted etymology of a Fomor, or a Fomorian, is undersea. For more. We know that more means sea or ocean. We get that from Morgan. The Morrigan, if you've researched her, you find out that her name means of the sea. Mor. That's also an Ogham. Mor, which means the ocean. Mor. For more. Under sea. Some people say underworld. That's fine. But undersea. They're undersea people. So that's already gets your imagination running rampant, right? Like, that's fascinating. That is so cool. And right there, you see why they would be be described as monsters. Maybe they're like sea monsters. Maybe some of them are like krakens and megalodons and Godzilla-type creatures, and who knows? Maybe they're just like alluring, darkly beautiful merfolk. Maybe they're mermaids. Who knows? Maybe they're all of those things. Who knows? In neo-paganism, in modern witchcraft, this path that we tread, they, like the Titans, usually are not really talked about in any positive ways, and are not encouraged to be worked with on a magical level. However, you know me. I'm a call on them. I'm a work with them. The Fomorians are, in my experience, profound. There's none of them that I have been able to work with on a regular basis. I don't know if it's because that's just not for me at this time. Maybe they're like, we don't want nothing to do with you. Who knows? But I will get interactions with them occasionally. Very few and far between. They are so mysterious, so dark, so old. Like, old. Sometimes it's even hard for me to interpret messages from them. They're so ancient. I don't know if you've ever worked with chthonic spirits yourself, meaning spirits from underneath, or old ancient spirits, like gods that predate gods kind of thing. But it is like, I can't explain it. It's just you literally my bones, my physical bones, like, shake. Like, they vibrate in my body, I feel like, when I work with the Fomorians. It's that kind of ancient, old, forbidden power. Do you know what I mean? As for their demeanor, I don't think of them as, like, angry or malevolent. I do think of them as, like, tired. Maybe a little, jaded. But then some, a little excited to be contacted again. Oh, fun facts. So their king, again, these are myths, so there could be 80 billion different kings depending on the story you pick to read. Okay? World mythology is not always clean cut like it is with Greece, where they decided that Zeus was the king, period. Here's the story regurgitated 80 times. Where other world mythology is not like that. You know, it's constantly being retold, rewritten, reworked by its own peoples. The Greeks were really one of the only monolithic cultures that we have, so that's why their stories are so streamlined. So anywho, Baylor, I say Baylor. Balor was usually their king. He is sometimes portrayed as a cyclops. I would assume that is Roman influence or Greek influence on the Celts. Sometimes they are seen as sea pirates, by the way, and invaders, which I think probably came from when the Celts were invaded by the Romans and the Vikings. Maybe they thought of them as the Fomorians, these monstrous people coming to take over your land. Which is interesting. It's fascinating. Anywho, Balor is the king. They say that he usually does have one eye, be it as a cyclops or just maybe he has a damaged eye. We don't know. And when he opens his eye, because I guess it's usually closed, He wreaks destruction with it. He releases curses, hexes, jinxes, malevolent power. That's awesome. Now, in Celtic Christianity, which if you've looked into Catholicism, you know that like Catholic Catholicism, Irish Catholicism, is very much its own thing, away from like the Roman Catholic Church. So, in Irish Catholicism, not so much now, I assume, but Balor and the Fomorians at large, there are others whose names we do have, were considered demons by the church, right? Which makes sense given the stories I've already told you. So Balor is like this archdemon, this henchman to Satan. And that kind of guise, that surviving mythology of Balor, can be echoed in wrestling. If you're familiar with wrestling, we're all familiar with it, but if you watch wrestling, like the worldwide wrestling, see, I'm old, so I wanted to say the WWF. They're called the WWE now. The, what is it? World Wrestling Entertainment or something like that now? It used to be Federation. Anywho. This is not a wrestling channel to talk about wrestling. But, if you're familiar with wrestling, and the WWE specifically, you know that there is a wrestler called Finn Balor. Finn Balor is an Irish guy whose wrestling persona very early on was called Balor the Demon. And he wore a crazy red and black and white outfit. He painted his mouth to look really big, and he looked like a demon, whose name was Balor. We can totally assume, I don't know him personally, but we can assume that that is where he took that. Whether he knows it or not, he is echoing an ancient god, which is awesome. It's awesome that that Balor would still get any kind of like presence in the modern world. I love seeing Titans and Fomorians and things like this being given space in today's world, however they choose to creep out upon us. Now, there is another Fomorian whose name I forget. Let's see. Tethra. Tethra was a Fomorian who winds up dying, but none of these spirits ever really die. So, he winds up dying. He's killed in battle. And he rules over a type of, not really an underworld, like a, what do you call it? Like a other world, I guess we'll just say an other world, an afterlife kind of realm. And it's a special world because it kind of echoes like Asgard, the Elysian Fields, places like this, right? So it's an afterlife that is not negative. It's not considered dark in any way. It's a happy, pleasurable afterlife. So there's fascinating information right there. Because then that makes you think, well, the Fomorians can't really be grotesque, horrible people, right? If one of them rules over a very pleasant afterlife. Anywho, that world is called it's like Magmel? Magmel? Sure, anywho. And you go there by Tethra choosing you, and you get to live out this pleasant existence. It's like a reward for the afterlife, right? When he dies, I don't know off topic, like off the cuff of my, like, you know, off the cuff here, who, or if anyone even takes over that realm. So that's fascinating. But anywho, he had a sword named Orna. When he dies, Orna is somehow taken by Ogma, who is one of the Tethra de Danann, the last group. And Ogma, as you know, is the god of Ogum, the god of poetry, etc. He takes the sword, and the sword speaks to him and recounts the sword's entire history of who it has fought, where the sword has been. Fascinating. That's just a fascinating tidbit. Now, Balor has a daughter who winds up having a child who is one of the Tethra de Danann, Lugh, as you probably know, if you don't know Lu, you should look up Lu. He's awesome. But Lu is a son of the Fomorians. A lot of them are children of the Fomorians, and some of them are children of the Tethra, are children of the Firbolgs, who are a group that came after the Fomorians, who is a group that Tethra actually clashed in battle with. Because supposedly, once the Fomorians are taken by the ocean, the Firbolgs come, or Firbolgs, who are men with bags. Interpret that how you like. And when they get there, Ireland has been an abandoned island for 30 years. Anywho, that's another story for another day. The Fomorians. Grotesque sea monsters, bloodthirsty giants, or written off in history and truly being demonized, bastardized people. Who knows? Who knows? Powerful chthonic spirits, definitely for sure, though. The Fomorians are fascinating. The history of Ireland is fascinating, like the mythical history of Ireland. This parallels, I think, not only the Titans and such, but the story of the plight of the Israelites, the Hebrews, the Jews, right? They have such a grand mythical history of their people, which is probably partly true, partly myth. And I think it's the same with the Irish. The idea of how they came to be is so grand. I gave you a small little taste of it today. It is so grand. Probably mostly false. Mostly myths and lore, but also probably some truth in there. Anywho, the Fomorians, I think they're so cool. They're so fascinating. They're so mysterious. And I just wanted to share it with you, to pique your interest a little bit. Alright, you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. And peace.